This is the story of one of the most shocking and bizarre unsolved murders in American history. A case so brutal, so carefully staged, that it has haunted investigators and fascinated the public for more than 70 years. The case of Elizabeth Short, better known to the world as the Black Dahlia. Los Angeles, January 15, 1947. The city was alive with post-war glamour, Hollywood lights, jazz clubs, and dreams of stardom. But on this cold winter morning, a discovery in a vacant lot would shatter that image of glitz and shine. A discovery that revealed a nightmare hidden beneath the surface of Hollywood's golden age. At around 10 a.m., a woman named Betty Berzinger was walking with her 3-year-old daughter in the Leimert Park neighborhood. In the grass ahead of her, she saw what she thought was a broken mannequin discarded on the ground. But as she moved closer, she realized a horrifying truth. It wasn't a mannequin. It was the body of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. The crime scene was unlike anything Los Angeles detectives had ever encountered. Elizabeth's body had been cut in half at the waist, her torso and lower half placed deliberately apart. Her skin had been completely drained of blood, leaving her ghostly pale. The killer had scrubbed her body clean, erasing almost every trace of evidence. Her arms had been posed above her head, her legs spread apart, and her face mutilated with deep cuts from the corners of her mouth to her ears. The killer had turned her into a grotesque display. But who was Elizabeth Short? Born on July 29, 1924 in Boston, Massachusetts, she was one of 5 daughters in a working-class family. Her childhood was marked by hardship. After her father abandoned the family, Elizabeth moved between homes, seeking stability and purpose. By her late teens, she set her sights on California, chasing the allure of Hollywood and the promise of stardom. With her striking dark hair, pale skin, and love of fashionable black clothing, she became known by friends and acquaintances as the Black Dahlia, a nickname inspired by a popular film noir of the time called the Blue Dahlia. But behind the nickname was a young woman struggling to survive. She drifted from hotel to hotel, often borrowing money from friends, always trying to find her big break. When police began investigating her murder, they were immediately overwhelmed by the brutality and the bizarre staging of the crime. There were no bloodstains in the lot where her body was found. Elizabeth had been killed elsewhere, and her body carefully transported. The precision of the cuts suggested knowledge of anatomy. Perhaps a doctor, a butcher, or someone with surgical training. Detectives believed the killer had spent hours with her, torturing her before death. News of the Black Dahlia murder spread like wildfire. Within days, newspapers across the country ran lurid headlines. The details of the mutilation were splashed across front pages, often exaggerated for shock value. The case became a media circus. Rumors flew that Elizabeth had lived a double life, that she was an aspiring actress mixed up with dangerous men, or that she had been targeted by a jealous lover. The attention brought dozens of so-called witnesses and more than 150 false confessions. Each one consumed time and resources, but none led to the killer. The autopsy painted a clearer picture of her final hours. Rope marks were found on her wrists, ankles, and neck, suggesting she had been tied and tortured. She had been beaten, cut, and brutalized long before her death. The medical examiner noted the bisection of her body was done with eerie precision. The separation of her torso and lower half had been made cleanly between the vertebrae, a technique suggesting surgical knowledge. Over the years, dozens of suspects emerged. Some believed the murder was a work of organized crime, punishing Elizabeth for connections she may have had. Others suspected a crime of jealousy or rage, carried out by someone she had been romantically involved with. One of the most prominent suspects was a wealthy Los Angeles physician named George Hodel. Hodel was a brilliant but deeply controversial figure, known for his lavish lifestyle and disturbing behavior. In the 1990s, his own son, Steve Hodel, who had become an LAPD detective, publicly accused his father of being the Black Dahlia killer. Steve uncovered old photographs, medical knowledge, and even journal entries that seemed to tie his father to the crime. He argued that George Hodel's access to surgical training, his violent history with women, and his connections to the Los Angeles elite gave him both the means and the ability to cover up the murder. Despite the compelling evidence, no formal charges were ever filed. Other suspects included men she had dated, acquaintances she had stayed with, and even random strangers who falsely confessed. But each lead ran into the same problem: no hard evidence. With her body scrubbed clean and the crime scene staged, detectives were left chasing shadows. What went wrong in the Black Dahlia investigation? Some point to the media frenzy, which sensationalized the case and pressured police into chasing false leads. Others blamed the limitations of 1940s forensic science. DNA testing and modern investigative techniques simply didn't exist by the time evidence could have been collected. Much of it had already been destroyed or contaminated. And there's another theory, that the killer wanted the case to remain unsolved, leaving behind a staged and taunting crime scene as a cruel puzzle for police and the public. Today, the murder of Elizabeth Short remains one of America's most haunting cold cases. Her story has inspired books, films, and endless speculation. But behind the headlines and the myths was a real young woman, just 22 years old, who came to Los Angeles chasing a dream, only to meet a tragic and brutal end. This is the story of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, a woman whose death created one of the most bizarre crime scenes in history, and whose mystery continues to haunt Los Angeles and the world.